Hi, I'm Tim Buchanan,
And I'm Rick Redding.
and welcome to Values, People, and Purpose. And we've got a real relevant topic to talk about, not just for right now, but from recent studies, it's trending too. But it's been a crazy year, hasn't it, Rick?
Oh, it has been. I mean, and just really, we were just kind of kicking it around before this, but I had the opportunity, as you know as well, to be over in Europe, when this thing broke out in early March, and going over there to visit my son Joshua and his wife Amanda and their new little baby Callan. And I was in London and Edinburgh and Belfast and Dublin over St. Patrick's Day, and I mean it was a ghost town. And I mean there was such fear, that's really what we're going to talk about here, right? And it just has changed our world like nothing else I can remember.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And the recent report that we're referring to is the one done by the Well-Being Trust. And Benjamin Miller, one of the study's authors, was interviewed by a lot of the news outlets, and he's just talking about deaths of despair from suicide, drugs, alcohol. And I think one of the more interesting things about this, and of course he's referring to the coronavirus and everything that's shut down and everything people are going through, and how it's creating these deaths of despair. But they prior to this, they had reported that there had been more lives lost to deaths of despair in 2017 than ever before. And people are they're losing hope in life and careers and all kinds of things.
Also, to just before this, I had Fox Business on, and they had the coronavirus group of the advisors Trump's put together, and they were talking about this, and I mean it clicked there when Alex Azar, the HHS secretary, he was saying the very same thing, not 20 minutes ago, and saying that there's a corner that we're kind of turning here. We may have leveled off the COVID-19 deaths, but just from the disease. But now, he said, we're really concerned about this, and we want, we need you guys to be aware of it. And so as far as deaths caused from suicide because of what we're all going through, so everybody's looking for answers right now.
Yeah, and I mean we're not going to get into a political discussion here because it was across the board, but for lack of adequate preparation globally and across all industries with this, the decisions that were made were kind of knee-jerk decisions, and one of the things that wasn't looked at from a systems perspective was the economic impact, the personal impact, the social impact, the relationship impact, families and things, schools. It just wasn't looked at from a systems thing that snuck up. It unleashed. Everybody made knee-jerk reactions that will just shut things down. And it's a little bit like law enforcement officers. A good friend of mine told me a lot of times, in wrecks, even though the seat belts hold you in, the force and the abruptness of the stop is so great that you just it kills you internally, even though externally you may not have any visible injuries. And that's kind of what happened here. And I think that it's way past time that people, school leaders, business leaders, start pushing and go to a full court press to get ahead of this curve and the secondary damage that all of this is going to do to people in their lives.
I think it was a curveball that nobody saw coming, right? I mean, not just the politicians and the business leaders, but what about church leaders, Tim? I mean, that comes pretty close to you and I both. But I think, for lack of a better comparison, we got caught with our pants down there too. And, where was the preparation, spiritually?
Yeah.
And did anybody have a plan for this?
Yeah, one of the things I see, and you brought up churches, is that I see a lot of people really struggling, having no idea how they carry on their faith without their familiar and traditional patterns and environments to do it in. And we're going to see the same thing in school. I just heard that Fighting Irish are going to have school next fall. They're going to test everybody when they get there, and then they're really going to discourage them from just going out. Once they get their students there, they're going to try and keep them pretty much on campus. And yet, with so many things, I mean, educational institutions don't know what they're going to do. I know I talked to the high school principal and football coach here locally, and he's like, man, we have no idea if we can have a football season or anything. And I've got a grandson that's going to be a senior and a football player, and he's really looking forward to it in a year. So, I mean, it's just everywhere and everything. And so in this, and I see a lot of leaders getting very grumpy and having a lot of despair too. So we want to talk about something today that can make a huge difference and a huge impact, something that leaders and families and even individuals can recognize and begin to work on. And this is from a resource that we developed a few years ago, but it's the issue of hope and creating a culture of hope. And we put it down into 7 different areas into one's focus, their power, their influence, how they deal with conflict, how they interact with community, how they come up with solutions, and the personal freedom that they find. All really viable topics for what's going on today. Don't you think, Rick?
Oh man, absolutely. If there's anything that can get you through the toughest situations, it's hope. And we have the discussion in our family, and I know you and I personally have talked about it a number of times. Is not understanding how we would face and something like this without a vibrant faith and hope in something greater than ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I know in the Bible, the book of Proverbs says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And a lot of people, they got sick hearts about all this. I mean, they've lost hope in our country and in our leaders and in their careers and financially. I mean, just you name it. And people are feeling a lot of despair. And in this and some that we really need, we identify hope is a builder, fear is an oppressor, and anger is a destroyer. And that's the 3 things we compare these different areas to: hope, fear, and anger. And when it comes to our focus for the future, hope focuses on a better future, fear focuses on a worse future, and anger doesn't even consider the future. You ever done something in the spur of the moment and you're angry and you did something that you wish you could take back? Well, that's an example of how fear doesn't even consider the future. It just becomes very reactive and angry.
Yeah, no, it's very, very personal for me too, Tim. And I'm kind of passionate and fiery about things anyway. And in my life, I've seen it work sometimes positively, but most times negatively.
Yeah.
And if I really look at it, and without hope, I mean, and I would guess spiritually, is fear the opposite of hope? I mean,
I know it's the opposite of faith, but
right.
It is hope. It's all in there together. And even in 1 Corinthians 13, everybody, loves it because it's the love chapter. But at the end it says these three remain: faith, hope, and love. And yeah, we talk a lot about faith and we talk a lot about love, but we don't talk about hope a lot. And, as and of course, this is the matrix we're working off of, and we're going to make this available for you down below, that you can download a copy of this if you want to start working from it, and maybe use discussion with your leadership team.
I didn't want to interrupt you on it, but I'll forget it otherwise. But what I love about this is it doesn't cost anybody anything. Hope. Everybody can have hope and make it operational in their own lives. Fear is easy. Get mad, and anger is easy. But hope, and that really is a solution that everybody needs to hear today. And it's available to everybody, regardless whether you're rich, poor, white, black, green, tall, short, whatever.
Yeah.
It's available.
Yeah, and we actually, and of course, I want everybody to think about this in terms of our present global and local situations too. But we put these three things in three different identifiers. Hope is a builder, and man, do we need to build things back up today. And I don't mean even in the economy or anything else. I mean just people in their own personal lives and in their spiritual and emotional health. They need to build back up. Fear is an oppressor. And when we're afraid of something, it literally does. It just pushes us down. We can't sleep at night. We have all this dread. And so fear is very oppressive in our life. And then anger is a destroyer. And that's all it does, is it destroys things. It destroys relationships, destroys hope, destroys the future and everything. Even in when we talk in the area of solutions, which we need a lot of solutions today. We need a lot of solutions to those things that nobody had ever planned for. And in our matrix here, we see that hope wants to consider others' needs and solutions because it's a builder. Fear doesn't consider others' needs because it's an oppressor. And then anger doesn't care about other people's needs. And so, we need to look at that. And if we find ourselves angry about everything, we got to get processed through that, because we stay there very long, we're going to start destroying some things. Right.
No, and I think we're seeing that, from all different levels, all different fronts right now. And, I probably spend too much time, on the political, social side of things. Just, I'm ambushed daily by my own choice by social media.
Yeah, we're considering an intervention for you, Rick.
Well, we get to see firsthand, those three forces and what's produced by each one of them, right? I mean, hope's the builder.
Yeah, and a lot of it too. I mean, in the anger and the fear, I talked to somebody just the other day, and they were literally hysterical about the things that they were hearing across the news. And so I went and researched some of those things, and all of it was completely off base. It wasn't an accurate representation. And and it happens on the left, the right, and the center. It does. And part of that anger and fear is first just stepping away from the garbage that hits us. I know we really like keeping up with events and things. So we do watch some national news, but you know what? We record it so we can just fast forward when it comes to the garbage that's just spreading the fear and the anger and the attributional bias and all that stuff. It's just go, because I'm not going to let someone else steal my hope. It's too precious a thing to have. I mean, it's what keeps us going. If despair leads to death, then I want the hope.
Yeah. I mean, when you lose hope, then it's just all darkness.
Yeah, it really is. And so, I think it's something that's really important for leaders to start looking at, because when we talk about these solutions, bringing community back together, we we need to get people back to a hopeful state. So when they do that, I mean, our frontline people we're going to depend upon that are in charge of different areas of our organization. We've got to have it, because, fear, when it comes to community, fear pits you against other people, and anger pushes people away from you. And those aren't the things that we need right now for organizations to bring it back together, because when it comes to community, hope invites others to join you. So it's incumbent upon leaders to start really thinking of it in terms of these three things, and beginning to walk people back. And it is kind of progressive. If people stay afraid too long, they get bitter and angry. And so we move them back from anger, and they're probably going to go back into the fear cycle, but from fear on back to hope. And this takes a very strong leadership to be able to do this. But first, the leaders have to recognize it.
Well, and I think that goes into the classroom as well, right?
Yeah.
The teachers, when we start back up again, and both of us being teachers, as part of our DNA, and parents as well, grandparents, the kids are really dependent on us to set that example, whether we're a teacher, a coach, or whatever. And again, there needs to be a plan before we get back into that classroom, before we get back in front of the folks that, God's placed us in charge of, or just like being patriarch of our family. That's been a big concern of mine lately. And all my children are adults, and we've got several of them have kids. And I'm just saying, it's really imperative that I take that position as the patriarch of my family, and because they're looking for that kind of leadership. And it's got to be based on hope for a better future, right? Not looking back in the past so much, but where's the solution? Where's the answers? Let's go in this direction. And yes, we're certainly going to fall on our face, but it's not the falling on the face, right, or down the stairs or tripping. It's what you do afterwards, right? Get back up, and it's got to be based on something above and beyond yourself.
Right. And, talking about the schools, the other day, I was listening to a webinar from Teachers Pay Teachers, which is an online site that I use for my values material for kids. And they said, coming this fall, teachers are going to be looking for, in order, they're going to be looking for digital things that they can teach online, because a lot of them weren't going to go to school, and they went to number two. The third biggest thing teachers and schools are going to be looking for, they predict in the fall, is social emotional learning tools, SEL tools, that they can use to help the kids get through this, because the kids are in a panic too. But that's where it comes back, that we say, hey, and I took a variation of this hope, fear, and anger, and actually created a free resource for teachers to use with their kids, and put it on Teachers Pay Teachers. And maybe we can make it an available resource linked here too. But just so that people, it actually walks people through it to rewrite their story and write a story with hope. But it's actually got an instrument in there, an assessment instrument that you can go through and see, in these areas of my life, am I angry? Am I fearful? Or am I hopeful? And it's something that businesses use too. It's just people have got to start realizing that we've got to change our focus, and we can't be overcome. Kind of like the old saying, all we have to fear is fear itself. Well, we have fear and anger to worry about, but we've got to get back to a hopeful state in so many areas.
Yeah, well, and kids will just naturally mirror what we are doing and what we're saying. It's one of the things, I kind of drift back to the political side of the fence, maybe too often, but, this thing, it irritates me, what the left is done. I'm on the right, of course, but what they've done with this Greta, and I don't even know her last name, is some young girl out of Scandinavia, and, they've taken her on a path, but she is angry, and I see that some of that in my extended family, of people mad, and I'll on social media, if somebody brings up something, asks for prayer, I always come back and pray for them and let them know that, because I'm always on board for seeing a miracle. We've experienced miracles in our life, and there's lots of people in need. But I've heard from several of my nieces and nephews who've just said, I'm tired of all this, praying business. We need something done. And I'm just kind of going, where did you get that? And that's not something based on hope. It's not. It's we want to do that, and it was a mirror reflection of me when I get mad.
Really, in the Old Testament, God told the nation of Israel, He says, "I've heard your cries. Now get up and move." And we do need to. I mean, that's what faith is praying, believing, and then moving out like it's really worthwhile. Unfortunately, many people pray kind of like they play the lottery. It's just kind of maybe something good will happen if I do this. And, of course, those who really know realize that prayer is a real thing. But even so, God always gave His people the tools they needed to get the job done. And so that's what we want to do in this. And that's what we're offering today through giving out this matrix is give people a tool that they can kind of begin to use at home. They can begin to use at the office, in their company, begin to use in their church, schools. And so I just want to give you here, as we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, I want to give you some things you can do. Number one is you have to realize that if we leave people in fear and anger too long, it's going to be very destructive to them and to everyone around them. And we don't want to do that. Values, people, and purpose. And so if the people if they lose hope, they're going to forget the purpose, and they're probably going to forget some values in that too. So we've got to focus in on that right now if we're going to get those other two things working right. And if you got someone that's angry or fearful, it doesn't do any good to just tell them, don't feel that way. I don't know if you've ever seen the Bob Newhart show and the skit they did on Stop It. If you've never seen it, you go to YouTube and you search for Bob Newhart, Stop It, and it's hilarious. And I use it all the time because it doesn't work. You can't just tell people stop it. If you have somebody that's scared to death of heights, you can't argue them out of it logically, because the mind does not know the difference between a real or an imagined fear. And so we've got to let people vent on those things. We've got to let them talk about it. We've got to let them process it. And then hope is something that we've got to give them. We can't just say to people, hey, stop being angry and stop being afraid. You need to be like this. Give them something to gravitate towards. And so you as a leader need to start really sitting back and looking at what do we have to be hopeful about. And you may have to create some things. You may have to create some resources. You may have to create a way back. You may have to create a way to help people get on their feet. You may have to remind them of some of the good things that are going on, because we don't hear that very often. So often today in our media, they go for the low-hanging fruit, which is always the bad news. And that's fine. I mean, we got to hear both sides of it, but give us some hopeful things too. And I think today we need more of it. And so, start giving them hope. And to do that, you've got to get it. You've got to work through those issues of anger and fear yourself as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming back to the COVID-19 situation we've been in, and a couple of the experiences, where I saw some hopelessness, and yet I saw, it was, one of them was, Kathy and I decided, because when we came back from Europe, the CDC came on the plane and in Atlanta, and it was just tough to get back home, for one, from the UK, but it was jam packed. And the CDC came on the plane and went through and they were taking temperatures and they escorted some people out right away. And there was some real fear and trepidation on that plane, especially, if somebody our age, that might have a flu or might have some kind of might not be feeling well. And the fear of not knowing what's ahead, or if you're going to be pulled out and, what's going to happen. And without a faith, without hope, it's a really difficult situation. And there's a lot of people panicked on there. And, we got through that and we got home and they told us to self-quarantine for 14 days. And we did that. And then Kathy and I decided that we wanted to do something out of the ordinary. And we started delivering food to the elderly homebound here in Colorado Springs, and because the Salvation Army and Care, they couldn't find people to help them deliver, and so we just said, we'll go ahead and do that, and so we went out and did that. And I am telling you, there were several of these, and most of them were elderly women or widows, and they were terrified. Oh, yeah. And when we brought them there, and we were with the Salvation Army, and we're here to give you a gift of food, it just tears of joy came over. They wanted to hug me, and I'm a hugger anyway, but we resisted that. But going from hopelessness and fear, cracking the door open, and then we had a name tag on there, Salvation Army Rick, and then giving them that. I mean, just flood of joy come back over, and it just gave them some hope.
Yeah.
So that are in that situation, and you're homebound, or I understand why people want to get out and go to the beach and go to, you just want to get out, and part of America, actually, Tim, I've been thinking about this too. What brought the Pilgrims here in the first place? What brought people here to America? Oh. It wasn't being rebellious. It was hope for a better future, right? And then they were willing to fight for that, when it came down to it. And so there's a little bit of a mix on both of those, but I'm just kind of saying, this situation, we're all in it. We need each other to get through it, but we need that separate thing, and call it God, faith, hope, love. That's that triangle, right? Faith, hope, and love.
Yeah, and and leaders really have to develop. I mean, this is shaking a lot of leaders, but leaders got to get back to it and kind of get their heads straight too. And leaders need to be ones who can really look out into the future and who have a strong will. I was talking to someone from Washington State here, and this is just a good example how we as leaders have to train ourselves to see the hope in sometimes hopeless situations. This individual had heard a story. Another one was kind of blown out of context, but they saw a story on the news about, this report came out about what volcanoes are going to blow next and what order they're going to blow in and everything. And these people are just freaking out. Well, now we're going to get blown up by these volcanoes out here where we live. And, my response was, well, great. You won't have to worry about COVID-19 anymore, will you? And so, you got to start looking at, there's a bright side to everything. It's like the old man who was at his wife's funeral. They'd been married their whole life. And, the friend came up to him and put his arm around him, and he says, I'm so sorry. This is just the worst thing I can think of in the world. And the old man said, well, yeah, he goes bad, but it could have been worse. And the guy said, what do you mean it could have been worse? He goes, your wife of 60 some odd years has died. How could things be any worse? And the old man said, well, it could have been me that died. And, so you didn't have to start by looking at things and finding some hope in it. And we tend to go to the despair. We tend to go to the fear and the anger. And that's why leaders become leaders, is because they need to be people that can not only find hope in the situations, but create hope in situations and then give that hope away. And that's my challenge to all the leaders, the teachers, the business owners, the church leaders out there is, find the hope, create it, and give it away. And start bringing people back, bring the organization back. We'll put this resource down here. You can download it. And we just want you to start bringing back some hope in your organization. And let's start taking this bull by the horns and getting ahead of the curve. And we're going to quit being on the tail end of this deal and get around to the front and let's steer it. There's a lot of things in this pandemic we can't steer, but there are things we can steer, and we need to get our hands on it. And the biggest thing we can help steer for people is hope. Got any closing comments, Rick?
Well, yeah, Tim, it'll be probably long-winded here, but, I was looking up, the Hebrew word for faith and hope, because, I just look, I think of both of those words, and a lot of times I'll replace one with the other. And I was kind of going, you know what? They're really similar. I wonder if those words, in the original Hebrew, are synonymous. And I came across, a Jewish storyteller or something, and he was talking about, just think of, in either one of them as being cords to a rope, and being patient, being waiting. My son Joshua is that way. He's always talking to me, Dad, I don't need instant gratification. I can wait. And whereas I'm always the kind of the instant guy. I want it now, and let's go and get it. And but this guy was talking. He said, faith and hope are like the cords in a strong rope. When they're what, and it was tying it into people. By yourself, there a lot of times it is a hopeless situation. You don't feel strong enough to make your way through that. Besides bringing somebody else with you or being an example to somebody else. He says when you put that small strand, weak strand of cloth together with another one, and you twist them together. He says pretty soon you have a rope that is unbreakable. And I thought that is so cool. And it's a rope that you can throw to somebody else, toss out to somebody else, and pull them up.
Absolutely.
So that's what I just
the cord of three strands is not easily broken.
Yeah. So everybody can participate in. It's a solution for everybody, and as much the end result is always much better than striking out in anger or closing up in fear. Okay,
absolutely. So let us know, comment, and let us know how you're building hope in your organization, how you're putting this matrix to good use, and we look forward to hearing your ideas and sharing with others.
Subscribe.
Yep, subscribe. Right? So you get all these. Okay.
Push the button. That's all it takes, right? It doesn't cost anything.
That's right.
And let us know what you think about this and what you're going through, and if you'd like to talk about this next time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. And for Values People in Person, I'm Tim Buchanan.
And I'm Rick Redding. We'll see you next time.
Have a great day.